This morning on Just the News, we had a very important story about the FBI's over-categorization of groups as domestic extremist groups and the impact on one veterans organization that was just trying to do good in America, got wrongly labeled. We know this information because the ranking member on the House Judiciary Committee, Congressman Jim Jordan, his investigators dug it up. An important story about the crushing power of the state, ruining someone's reputation. And joining us right now is Congressman Jordan. Great to have you on the show, sir.
Good to be with you, John.
This whole domestic violent extremist tag, I know it's a political thing, and people say, well, it's a statistical thing. They're just jinning the statistics. But in this case, you've shown a real group and its leaders and its founders were smeared by the FBI by this label, even though the evidence showed they weren't a threat at all. Tell us what you found.
Yeah. Well, yeah, not once, but twice. I mean, they checked this guy out a couple of years ago. Fine. He's an American veteran, serving his community, loves his country. Like I said, served his country, and then some woke analyst at the FBI decides, oh, wait a minute, this guy, he flies the American flag, he owns a gun, he voted for Trump, or whatever basis they come up with that fits the Joe Biden narrative that half the country are, quote, extremists, and they investigate him again. And it's part of this pattern we're now seeing, John, where a number of FBI agents have come to us as whistleblowers talking about the pressure to juice the numbers and catalog and create and have all these, quote, domestic violent extremism cases. That is a concern, particularly when you view it in the broader context of in what we have seen from the FBI and the Justice Department over the last 6 years.
Yeah, it really is amazing. And one of the things that comes out, because it was one of the things we learned from the Russia collusion because of your great work, the power that these analysts suddenly wield. We know from a whistleblower from Chuck Grassley that it was an analyst who intervened into the Hunter Biden case and tried to portray the laptop as Russian disinformation, warded some agents off. When I used to cover the FBI, agents used to be supreme and the analysts were supposed to be support staff. It seems like these analysts are getting an awful lot of power and they have some sort of political agenda.
No, they definitely have a political agenda. And it's also interesting in that story, those individuals involved in suppressing evidence on the Hunter Biden story in the fall of 2020, just prior to the election. Some of those same people, the ones whistleblowers cite as pressuring them, particularly this individual, Timothy Thibault, pressuring them to juice the numbers and categorize and catalog these cases as DVEs, to use the lingo at the FBI, when in fact, as I said before, they're not. And I thought a colleague of mine made a great point yesterday, Congressman Gates, in a hearing. He said, think about how many times now the FBI has inserted themselves into the election process. In 2016, they were spying on President Trump's campaign. In 2018, they had the special counsel to impact it. In 2020, they suppressed evidence relating to the Biden's foreign dealings, the Biden family foreign dealings. And now here they are in 2022, raiding the home of the former president of the United States just last month, taking the phone of a sitting member of Congress, and all the things that are associated with what they're doing now. So time and time, what's that, 4 elections in a row where the FBI has inserted themselves into the election process, and I think trying to impact how we, the people, decide who ultimately represents us.
Yeah, that is a scary thought and one we all need to be afraid of. When you talk about Russia collusion, there's yet another. I didn't think we could learn anything more about Russia collusion, but we did this week. John Durham revealing that Igor Danchenko, a man that the FBI knew had lied to them, who they knew had ties to Russian intelligence, who they knew had tried to bribe or lure Obama administration officials into giving him classified information, the man who gave bad information to the Steele dossier, they then put him on the American taxpayer's roll as a confidential human source. Your reaction to that, what are we doing in the FBI?
Well, I mean, the fact that they took American tax dollars to pay someone that they knew was a liar to, I would assume lie to him some more, makes absolutely no sense. But the fact that he was a confidential human source, someone pointed out, and first of all, thanks for your good reporting on so many of these issues. I mean, your work's been tremendous on getting to the bottom of what was going on in the FBI and the whole Mueller investigation and everything else. But someone pointed out that when they hired him, it was 2017. And of course, when they got rid of him as a confidential human source, it was right at the time that Durham was named as special counsel. And people have pointed out, when you're a confidential human source, Does that mean that they don't have to share that information, even with the intel community, even with Devin Nunes, who was chairman at the time? I don't know, but I think that's an important point that was made. So again, just as you said, just when we thought we knew everything and how bad it was, it seems to get worse with what's going on there at the Justice Department.
Yeah, and that's a really great point. I've heard that from a couple of people in the last 24 hours. He stays on payroll to October 2020. The Mueller investigation's over in April of 2019, so I assume there's no more Russia collusion to investigate. Keeping him on the payroll might have just simply kept him out of the ability for people like you to question him and find out just how bad the Steele dossier and the FBI's conduct was. Do you think that could have been a possible motive?
I mean, who knows? I think it's interesting that it's raised. I always look at the timeline when you're doing these investigations and this oversight work. I think the timeline sort of fits, but who knows exactly why this was done. I just find it, the fact that they went and spied on a presidential campaign based on the dossier they knew was false, the guy who was involved in giving that false information, they then used American tax dollars, the folks I represent in the 4th District of Ohio, their tax money to pay this guy, to bring him on the payroll. I just find that astonishing, as I think most Americans do.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. I want to turn to fixing the FBI. We now know how problematic it is, right? We know they over-collected evidence at Trump's residence. We know they took a bad dossier and gave it to the FISA court. We know they failed to protect young women in the Olympic scandal. The list is so long, we could spend a half hour just enumerating the list. I know you're going to do serious oversight. You have been. Is there room for a blue ribbon commission to get something bigger and say, hey, we have to restore confidence and do something like the Church Commission in the 70s, which did bring a lot of reforms to the intelligence and law enforcement communities of America?
Yeah, I think that exercise is definitely needed, whether it's done in a special select kind of committee or blue ribbon commission. That's even maybe with some members outside of Congress. I don't know. I guess my preference is so much of this is under the jurisdiction of the Judiciary Committee, which I hope after the November election to get the privilege of chair. And if in fact the American people put us in the majority, I think we can do it there as well. But whether it's in the Judiciary Committee or in some special commission, I think that analysis, that exercise, that process needs to happen, and there has to be reform there. You think about in the last month what we've seen from the Biden administration, where they raided the home of a former president and the likely candidate for the Republican Party against the current president in the next election. The very next day, they took the phone of a sitting member of Congress. The Inspector General at the Justice Department, who's supposed to provide independent oversight, participated in the imaging of that phone taken by the FBI of a sitting member of Congress. The Inspector General should have said, no way, I'm not going to participate in that. You shouldn't do it. There's constitutional concerns there. But he actually participated and imaged the phone. And then, of course, the President of the United States calling half the country extremist and fascist. I mean, if that doesn't frighten American citizens about their liberties, about their Constitution and the Bill of Rights in the Constitution, I don't know what does. So we need to seriously look at how this all has to change in a way that respects the liberties of the American people.
Yeah, and I want to go to one last issue before you go. You have been one of the great voices of calling out censorship, and now we're beginning to see this extraordinary conspiracy or collusion between the FBI and social media companies. It started with Mark Zuckerberg's thing. Today, my good friend Miranda Devine in New York Post has an amazing story saying Facebook was accessing private information from people's accounts and sending it to the FBI if they were questioning anything about the 2020 election. How important is it to find out the full level of complicity, and how do we stop it going forward?
Well, you highlight every time you see it done. You look at the changes we may need to make to Section 230 and other parts of the law. But the fact that this happened, and I just scanned the story. I don't know if the FBI first came to Facebook or Facebook just out of the quote goodness of their heart decides to give over this private information. So I think that's an important element too. But understand what happens so often now, and this is again frightening. The left comes up with the lie, namely, oh, half the country's extremist. The left comes up with the lie. Big media prints the lie. Big tech amplifies the lie. And in this case, they actually work with the government and the media to implement what they're talking about. And when you speak out against it, they just call you names, call you racist, call you extremist and fascist and all these things. That's sort of the template now. And it's, sure again, it is not how America is supposed to work. And it's frightening. It
sure is, sir. Well, Congressman, I know you're going to get to the bottom of it. Thanks so much for spending time with us today. Great honor to have you on the show.
Thank you.